Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the City of Mesa Planning and Zoning Board public hearing. We'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. The first thing I wanted to mention is if you are here to speak about any item on the agenda that's indicated with an asterisk, it means it's on the consent agenda, and you'll need to fill out one of these blue cards and bring it up to our staff as soon as possible so we can pull that item off the consent agenda. Do we have any pending cards right now? Mr. Wesley, no more cards other than what we have right here? Okay, let's just wait just a minute and make sure everybody has a chance to submit a card. This is 4D. 5A. Yeah, there's one in the back that's being filled out, so we'll give it just a minute. Well, we have B and that's D. Yeah. And if we don't get a card on 4A, Board Member Boyle would like to pull it off consent.
I thought 4A he wants to pull off?
Yeah. Board Member Boyle, it was item 4A that you wanted pulled off consent, correct? The North Center Street? Okay.
Okay, so that means then if that's the case, this over here, 4A needs to come out as well, right?
Well, 4A is its own case, right? That wasn't right.
Right, but Tim, do you want 4A off as well?
Yeah, he wants 4A.
I want to discuss 4A.
Yeah.
4A and 5A?
Is 5A different thing?
No, but that's a different one.
Oh, no, sorry, it's a different one.
Yeah. We'll get it all organized in just a minute.
Okay, all right,
Make sure that we're all on the same page.
okay.
We have, looks like one or two more cards are coming.
To government to read because they're all scheduled.
All right. All right, let's see which ones these are. Thank you very much. Let's see what we can do here. Recents. Okay, oh, you got here. All right. Oh. Okay, I think we've got it all, but we're going to quickly talk amongst ourselves to make sure that we're all on the same page with how the consent agenda will be read. So we have item 4A is off consent. 4B, 4D, and 5A.
And then, okay.
Is that, you concur with that, Shelley? Okay. All right, so we're going to go ahead and read the consent agenda, and then we'll vote on that in one vote, and then we'll move on to the regular agenda.
These are the items on the consent agenda for the October 14th, 2018 meeting for Planning and Zoning Board. The first item on the consent agenda is the minutes from the October 16th, 2018 and October 17th, 2018 study sessions and regular hearing. Item 3A, zoning case ZON 1800580, District 5, within the 5100 block of East McKellips, located west of Higley Road on the south side of McKellips. It's a site plan review. The staff recommendation is approval with conditions. Item 3B, ZON 1800710, District 5, within the 4800 block of East Jasmine Street, the 4800 block of East Ingram Street and the 1700 and 1800 blocks of 48th Street, located south of McKellips Road and west of Higley Road. It's a site plan review, and that is also approval with conditions. Next item is 4C, ZON 1800692, District 4, within the 1000 block of East University Drive, located west of Stapley Road, Stapley Drive on the north side of University Drive. It's a rezone from OC to RM4. This request will allow for residential development. It's also approval with conditions. The next item, 5B, 1040 East University Drive, District 4, within the 1000 block of East University, located west of Stapley Drive on the north side of University Drive. It's a preliminary plat, approval with conditions. Item 5C, Cadence at Gateway, DU-4, District 6, the 5500 through 6000 blocks of South Chrisman Road, the 1000 through 10,000 through 10,200 blocks of East Williamsfield Road, located north of Williamsfield Road and east of Chrisman Road. It's a preliminary plat, approval with conditions. Item 6A, ZON.
That's not on there.
Oh, that's on consent. That concludes the items on the consent agenda.
Thank you, Board Member Allen. Do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I'll move the consent agenda. Chair.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, everyone please vote. All right, motion passes. The consent agenda is approved. We'll go ahead and move on to the items on the regular agenda. The first item is item 4A, case ZON 18-00246 in District 4. This is within the 400 and 500 blocks of North Center Street and within the 400 and 500 blocks of North Pima, North Lewis, and North Serine, and within the 500 block of North Pasadena, north of 526 North Pasadena, approximately 32 acres. This is a rezoning request from RM2, RM2HL, RM4, DR2, DR2HL, DR3, DB1 and LC to ID2 and ID2HL to establish zoning designation that reflects the historic development pattern in the area. Mr. Ballmer is the staff planner. Go ahead and give a presentation, please.
Thank you, Chair, board members. As you mentioned, this is a rezoning from a number of zoning designations to the ID2 zone for the area for the Washington Park neighborhood. Washington Park is one of the older neighborhoods within Mesa. It actually developed outside of the city limits and was annexed into Mesa in 1930, I believe. The residents there have a strong sense of pride in their neighborhood, and they've been working for quite a number of years on ways to improve their neighborhood. They completed a quality of life plan a number of years ago that identified some goals to help improve their neighborhood, spur some growth, some new development in the neighborhood. One of the goals out of the quality of life plan was to designate Washington Park as a historic neighborhood. Historic neighborhoods have certain criteria that they need to meet, and Washington, that might not be the best route for Washington Park. So what the city did in 2016 was to establish a historic neighborhood, a heritage neighborhood for Washington Park. And to kind of further that along, the city, specifically Mr. Wesley, has been working for a while on rezoning the property. It's currently zoned mostly multifamily residential. So a developer could come in, buy a number of parcels and develop apartments, things like that aren't really consistent with the current development patterns within the neighborhood. So the city has proposed a rezoning to the ID2 designation. ID2 is an infill district, and it's meant to be used for bypassed and underutilized parcels to kind of spur some of that redevelopment activity. The zoning ordinance does outline some criteria for the ID2 zone that this neighborhood meets all those criteria. Some of the goals that the county or the city is trying to achieve with this rezoning is to bring stability to the neighborhood by removing that multifamily zoning, put some development standards in place that are more consistent with the historic nature of the neighborhood, the narrow lots, the smaller setbacks, things like that. provide some more flexibility in uses for home-based businesses to kind of get maybe a little more economic activity going, and to facilitate commercial along University and Center streets to bring in some more development in that area. So as part of the ID2 zone, you create development standards, essentially. You could create development standards from scratch. What the city did was looked at kind of what was already on the books, what that would fit in that neighborhood. And there are two transects from our form-based code, T3N and T4NF. The portions of the Washington Park neighborhood that have residential zoning currently would get the T3N development standards. Those are really consistent with single-family dwellings, smaller setbacks, covered patios, things along those lines. Form-based code is more worried about the form of the building, what the building actually looks like. And the portions of Washington Park that are zoned commercial would be a T4NF development standard, which allows everything in T3N and then some additional uses, townhomes, Main Street mixed use, those type of things. I did want to point out there's two properties in Washington Park that have historic overlays, the Alston House and the former Mount Calvary Baptist Church. Though this rezoning wouldn't impact those historic overlays, they would remain historic overlays. If the board were to approve it, it would be ID2HL on those properties. We do have some design guidelines that are outlined in the staff report. Some of those guidelines were to maintain the width of existing lots from 35 to 55 feet, primarily single-story homes, some reduced setbacks in the front, primarily single-story homes. Second, 2 stories could be a possibility, but it would require a special use permit. So the applicant would need to come back before the board and really show how that fits within the neighborhood. Materials consistent with the building types in the area, brickwork accents, that type of thing. So the goal with this is really to keep Washington Park new development in there consistent with what's already there. As I mentioned at our work session, our study session before this meeting, there is the property at 455 North Serine, 405 North Serine, that has requested the T4NF development standards applied to those parcels that are currently identified in the map as T3N. Their current zoning designation is DR3, which allows uses very similar to what would be allowed under the T4N development standards. And with that, I would be happy to answer any questions the board might have.
Thank you very much. Does anyone have any questions for staff?
That's fine.
Board Member Boyle.
I guess I'll start. I'm taking it off the consent, and I know some property owners in the area that have talked to me in the past about plans they have to develop this neighborhood in a different direction than its historical nature, I think. And they've said, look, its proximity to the conference center, to the hotel, to the baseball stadiums, to the other things happening right along there, give it a different potential to become a different kind of neighborhood. But I understand that the neighbors have been seeking for something like this. I guess one of my concerns in making something historical or quasi-historical is if you start developing around it, it's kind of trapped in this area, and this is pretty close to Site 17, which is going to have some big effect in the area and other things like that. So I guess I'm interested in knowing a little bit more about the neighbors' process of coming together and doing this. Well, that's what and sort of the city's thinking for this, because again, people I've talked to have been envisioning different things for portions of this neighborhood.
Sure, Chair, Board Member Boyle. So the citizens or the residents in the area have been very active over the years in looking for ways to kind of maintain their neighborhood. There's a big sense of pride in their neighborhood, and they developed a quality of life plan, which bullet pointed some strategies that they had to kind of keep the character of Washington Park, but also look for ways to kind of spur some new development. So this really originated with the residents of Washington Park, and the city has gone through an extensive citizen participation process. We held meetings, did letters, and the feedback that we've gotten from residents has been very positive to this point. I have not had anybody email or call me with concerns about the project, but that's really where it originated, was with the residents in the neighborhood.
Chair, Board Member Boyle, we do have a member of the leadership from Washington Park here who's able to speak to more
that would be
detail
great.
about what the neighborhood's been doing over the last several years.
Yeah, I'd love to hear from them.
Could you make sure that you state your name and address into the
Sure.
record, please?
Good evening, PNC board membership. My name is Maria Mancinas, and I reside at 542 North Lewis, Washington Park Community, Mesa 5201. I have, my family and I have lived there since 1982. Like Mr. Ballmer said, in 2012, we received funding from LISC under the leadership of Teresa Bryce Himes to organize the neighborhood and develop and create what is now our quality of life plan. This document was created with the assistance and support from local nonprofits like Save the Family, West Mesa CDC, Helen's Hope Chest, Mesa United Way, the City of Mesa elected officials, the neighborhood office, planning and zoning. So we organize our community. We met regularly, sometimes once a month, sometimes two times a month. So we identify together, collaboratively, we identify 7 goals for the neighborhood. And they include education, housing, safety, code compliance, transportation, just to name a few. And this is the product that we develop. So right now, I'm in the implementation process. And thank you to the nonprofits and planning and zoning, we were able to attain historic designation. The neighborhood was not eligible to be incorporated to state, national, or local historic registry because there's a lot of housing that was deteriorated or they are no longer there who were built back in 1940, 1950. Unfortunately, many of the residents moved out, so we were not able to attain what is an official historic designation. However, we work hard to receive what is called a heritage neighborhood. There's plenty of documentation, records, there's signage, and I'm very happy to report that we have been included on all the economic development that is going on in downtown. We were very well represented with the consultants for Site 17 yesterday. We met with the consultants one-on-one, the steering committee, and the community meeting in the evening. So I'm here to report that we have community meetings with the assistants. They came to the neighborhood and report about the process and the updates and making sure that all the residents were involved in this proposal. And so we completed the historic designation, and this proposal is totally aligned with one of the goals of our quality of life plan, which is to create new housing with developers who will respect the history of the neighborhood. So we want to move along with all the development that's going on in downtown Mesa. So I'm here to give you a copy of our QLP and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
My question sort of just is more a general concept about historical designations and how they're used. Again, I lived in New York for 10 years. If they did historical things there like they do them here, the city would still be 1 story tall and no one would ever talk about it. So I'm worried about some of the historical designations that are coming in or similar that are kind of hamstringing the ability for development to continue to grow and for things to change and for us to get into the 21st century.
Right.
And that's more general on, like there was some, when the those apartments near the temple were coming in. There was some objection to the historical things that were there. And I guess what concerns me a little bit as I hear about it, you say there are a lot of deteriorated lots. They're houses from the 1940s and 1950s. I don't know who, I guess that means there's a lot of work. If you're going to buy into this neighborhood, you're going to have to invest a whole lot of money or live in a house that's deteriorated, which doesn't sound hopeful to the future. I mean, at some point, a house built in the 40s or 50s is going to become unlivable unless it's completely rebuilt, right? I mean, there's a time limit on how long you can keep renovating historical houses, as I understand
Right.
it.
Actually, there's a developer who's purchased some properties, and he has met with us, and we made clear our ideas on rehabilitating those historic houses. And so far, he has kept his commitment. We haven't got any, these two houses on Serine. I spoke with them this past Saturday, and he said that these two historic houses will look beautiful. They are not planning on adding or changing the physical structure of these two properties. So far, this developer has been in communication with the residents, and he has been able to do the work without changing the physical or the original structure of these properties.
So this developer is purchasing properties, renovating the interiors, and then reselling them or
And
renting
they're
them out?
reselling, renting, or for home ownership.
Okay.
Mr. Wesley, I think you still are, aren't you, the acting historic preservation?
No, I'm
No,
not.
you're not.
When I inherited the zoning administrator, I passed that off to Mr. Stedman.
Oh,
So,
Well,
but I still have some
instead-
background
Okay.
in the area based on a few years of doing it. Mr. Boyle, want to make a distinction here between the Washington Park area has been designated as a heritage neighborhood, not a historic district. And the primary emphasis of that is some of the basic building character and the way buildings engage the street and so forth. It's not a historic district in that you've got to keep those same structures there. It can allow the individual structures to go and new ones be built, but they want to fit the context and pattern of development that's been there, not have something that's just totally out of character happen, particularly within the interior. And the ID zoning district that we're proposing reinforces that. We do have along Center and University the T4NF, which does allow for more vertical development. It's not, again, high-rise. We're kind of a ways from Main Street. We don't want to compete with Main Street with what happens there, but it does allow for two-story buildings to be built along those frontage types and be kind of a modern, more urban building in that area. There's nothing that would require it to have any kind of historic look to it.
And that part's understood. As I think about it in 10 years of two-story, like one of the things I noticed was that two-story houses would be challenging to put in here because of the things that are going in. If that becomes the popular thing that people want to build and they can't do it here, then this neighborhood's going to get skipped over as development. And those are just my worries, that it might make it even harder for this neighborhood to kind of evolve and become whatever it's going to be in the next 50 years if it has this sort of designation. And I was worried about that one with the other historical designations that have come through too. It's like, well, what if new people want to come in and they want to live in a different kind of house? They're limited. I think it's limiting in a way. I don't know that that's wise in the long run.
That's a very legitimate concern. So far, all the property owners are invited to our meetings. We have the Pitts, who owns several houses, the rentals, and they have not expressed any desire to build like two-story houses. So far, we haven't received any oppositions, neither from residents who are currently living there or property owners who own houses and for rentals.
Yeah, and just to clarify, the developer that I know just texted me back and said, "Don't worry about it." So this is just coming from me. This is not from someone I know that has a financial interest. This is just my overall concern with giving designations like this to big parts of the city.
Does anyone ever have any questions for Ms. Mencinas before we just deliberate? Just so I don't want you to have to stand there forever.
No questions, but I just want to thank Maria for coming forward and speaking. I think this is a prime example of what every neighborhood in Mesa should be doing. They've owned their future. They've designated what they want to see for their future, and I think it is incumbent upon us to honor that. I'm really not concerned about what potential developers might see there. I'm concerned about what the residents see for their own future.
Right.
There's a real historic quality to this neighborhood. There are reasons that people have lived there for so long. It was one of the first neighborhoods where people could own property who were minorities in the city of Mesa. I think we have to tread carefully when we talk about what we see for the future. I am more concerned about what residents see for their own future, especially for a neighborhood that has had the kind of challenges and the historical creation behind this neighborhood.
Right.
So I just wanted kudos to all the work that you and your neighbors have done. I'm
Thank
fully
you.
supportive of this idea.
Thank you. We appreciate it.
And I am too. I'm not trying to say, don't do this. I'm trying to say, in the next 50 years, the next 100 years, different things might come along, and the agency of the neighbors at that point might be hamstrung by the things that we're doing here, and that's my bigger concern.
Well, I have my daughter here, Erica Mancinas. She has a degree in economics. So who knows what the future will bring in 40, 50 years ahead. So for the moment, this is the desire of the residents that live and work and dream in the neighborhood. So we appreciate your support. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. We have just a few cards. One is from David Johnson, who says he wishes to speak on this item.
Madam Chair, members of the board, always a pleasure to be here. My name is Reese Anderson, 1744 South Val Vista. And our client is Mr. David Johnson and John Starr. And I'm sorry I was a few minutes late. I've turned in the blue card. I hope it's okay that I address the board.
You only get 3 minutes, though.
Thank you, ma'am. I promise. I know the last time we were here, we had a long time, and I'll keep short. We're here in full support of this plan, and not speaking to any of those larger issues that Board Member Boyle or Board Member Villanueva Saucedo speaking about. We're just talking about 405 North Serine, and we gave you a letter the other morning, and I know a couple of you raised some questions about citizen input and what did the neighbors around say. If I heard correctly, I thought that was a question. So I want to give the staff a support letter from the O'Bannon family, who lives just to the north of us. As Mr. Johnson purchased the property in July of this year, late July, and has since become friends with the O'Bannon family. So I want to give that letter. Here's copies for everyone there, so that you know that we have been talking with our neighbors around us. Of course, immediately to our east is City of Mesa property. And I know that the staff are in support of this. We would simply just ask to clarify what our letter says. That you forward the plan to the council with the recommendation that this property, 405, also have that T4 NF designation on it. And we don't want to belabor the point. If you want me to explain more why, I can. It was in the letter. We think it's clear. Mr. Johnson, again, has DR3 on it there now on that property. And T4 NF really is the closest to T4 NF. I'd be happy to answer any questions. I had one question for staff, which was simply, is there any design constraints, architecture type of constraints? Thank you, Mr. Wesley is shaking his head no for the record. So thank you. That answers our question there.
Thank you.
Any questions, Madam Chair, members of the board? Thank you so much
Perfect
for letting
timing,
us
right
speak.
on your
Yep, thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, thank you. We had a couple more cards. Just give me just 1 second to make sure. Let's see what it is. Erica Mencinas, would you like to also come up and just state your name and address for us, please?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Erica Mencinas. I reside at 542 North Lewis, Mesa, Arizona 85201. So as my mother, Maria Mencinas, mentioned, I was born in this neighborhood, 542 North Lewis, and thanks to the support of my community and the support of my neighbors, I was able to study my undergraduate degrees in New York City, where I lived also for 8 years. And so I recognize Board Member Boyle's comments about brownstones and the ability to preserve historic buildings while adding character and modernizing and fulfilling really, the character of a neighborhood and the character of a city. Along with that, I want to just mention that after living in New York for 8 years, I decided to come back home and come back to my neighborhood and to my residency because, like many people that I know, I have a lot of pride in Mesa, and I love Mesa, and I love my neighborhood. And I want to mention that this neighborhood specifically, while it is important to think about how Mesa is growing, and especially with Site 17, this neighborhood is a multi-generational neighborhood. So along with myself and also many of my friends and many of people that I know that I grew up in the neighborhood have returned to the neighborhood. And this is where they're growing up, and this is also where they're raising their families. And so while it is important to think of the overall structure and the overall character of a city, I think this neighborhood is unique and specific in that it serves and it continues to serve, and historically it has served multi-generational families that grow up there, that continue to come back, and that continue to raise their family and their children in this area. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's see. Okay, and we have a card from Nancy Thompson.
I live on 417 North Sorine Street, which is just north of 405, two properties. So we've been there about 18 years, one of the oldest homes in the neighborhood. My family has a 200-year-old farmhouse in Rhode Island that is absolutely fine because it's maintained. So as far as the length a home can go, that should never be limited, and our home is more special than any new home. Cookie cutter homes that were built 70s, 80s, improvement, really? You can't judge a home or a neighborhood on what others think of modernization. In our quality of life plan, part of the goals is to help with our homes for improvements, which a lot of those homes, being segregated neighborhood, had limited resources, I believe, when they were built, and some were built after, World War II era, when there was overall limited resources. So there are challenges, but they should be respected. The other half of my neighborhood was Site 17, and many of those were bullied out of their homes. Their heritage was lost. When they talk about their roots, what are they going to say about that site if people with market rate money are allowed to live there? The purpose of a city is to help its community. It's to support people. Those people on Site 17 were not supported well. We have been supported well, and maybe it's because John Wesley respects history. There's many people challenges. There's many reasons why people don't have a skill or didn't go to college. They're providing for their family, or they have learning disabilities or adverse childhood experiences. All those things can be incorporated into our plan. I've worked with neighbors for over 3 years. Our plan is of the people, by the people, for the people, because we were all involved in those goals, and we were allowed to, in our limited ways, try to implement those in our own way that we are able to do. It's also a living document, which means in the future, if others come and adjustments are needed and data could show the need for that, then the generations, people in the future in that neighborhood can do what we did, is come together and agree and say this is needed. So that's one beautiful thing about that plan, is that it should be flexible, which is written into the plan. So I anticipate, I hope I don't understand zoning stuff, which makes me nervous. Like I want something written in almost that if once it's implemented and problem comes up that might be harmful, that that neighbor would receive help to, remain in the neighborhood, help their home or whatever. So it's not top-down burdensome to anyone in the neighborhood. It should be uplifting and keep it as a neighborhood, not turned into non-neighborly, non-community. So I just wanted to, I hope something I said maybe is a little bit different than what others have said. And like our alley we weren't included in the planning of it. And that was a disjointed part of this.
Thank you for
So,
your comments. I'm sorry to cut you off, but I appreciate your comments, though. We don't have any more blue cards, so at this time, we can open it up for discussion with staff or amongst ourselves, whatever you would like to start.
Well, I'd like to start because, so I live about a mile to the west of you guys, and I have the same thing, a neighborhood that was built out kind of in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. And I did the same thing. I went and I lived in New York. Like, we have almost the same story. I lived in New York, and then I came back, and I moved right back in the same neighborhood because I wanted that same feel. And then, as I've lived there for the past 6 years, I've seen other people move back, decide the houses aren't big enough, and move to Gilbert. And that's my concern, because my neighborhood's been doing this slightly other thing where people are saying, oh, these houses are old, these houses are small, this isn't what we want anymore, and they're leaving, and then the houses are being bought by people who aren't living in the neighborhood, and they're renting out, which I feel has had a negative effect on our neighborhood. So I think we're in the same boat. I feel the same way. From my experience, something like this, and like the lady said, we don't want this to hamstring the neighborhood. We don't want this to make anything, and that's my concern, that this might be putting some limits that could make it difficult. When I talk to people, I'm an architect, and people want to build a house, if they see that the zoning isn't what they want, they'll often just drop the idea of that property off the bat. And I'll say, look, I'm on planning and zoning board. These things can be changed. You're like, oh, I don't want to go through months of changing that. So that's another thing that I think could concern people that are buying in the neighborhood. And that's what worries me a little bit about this designation.
I just wanted to comment that you need to watch HGTV more. There's it's kind of like a movement. People go and buy these older homes and rehab them. And this isn't that actually large of an area considering the size of our city, I feel. But I think this is what we look for in Mesa, is those individual pockets, those unique things. I know there's areas in Mesa that are, you have Lehigh areas that have a different feel. You've got Willow District in Phoenix, all these different areas. And those are historic designations. And this is more so just the, just what they describe it as a heritage neighborhood designation versus having to go through all the bells and whistles to comply with that designation instead of a historic district. So I think people will seek out to live in here at that designation, that they'll want to go into here if that's what they look for. And then we have a lot of other areas in Mesa that can fit for whatever else somebody desires, and that's what they'll do. And then also in regards to the other requests we had from a homeowner about, I believe it was David Johnson, regarding the T4 versus the T3. After reviewing the zoning codes and compared to what is currently existing allowed and what versus going to the T3 or the T4, I do agree with them that the T4 is more compatible with what they currently have with regards to height and density. So rather than making it more restrictive on them, and I feel like as Tim mentioned, you do want to provide that transition and that ability to be denser in certain areas along University and Center. So I think complying with the owner's request to change those to the T4 is appropriate.
Thank you. Any other comments? Are we ready for I think we're ready for a motion.
I'd like to make a motion that we approve ZON 18-00246, District 4, within the 400 and 500 blocks of North Center Street and within the 400 and 500 blocks of North Pima, North Lewis and North Sherine, both sides, and within the 500 block of North Pasadena, north of 526 North Pasadena, both sides, and also including the rezoning of 405 North Sherine to the T4 and F zoning district. That we approve the rezoning from RM2, RM2-HL, RM4, DR2, DR2HL, DR3, DB1, and LC to ID and ID2HL, as the staff has recommended.
Mr. Wesley, did you have a comment?
I just want to make sure I understood what Board Member Allen said just a moment ago, that we would be changing the development standards for the property at Sarine and University
Yes.
to the T4 and F.
Yes, yes.
As opposed to changing
That's
the
what I
zoning
meant to
to
say,
that.
yes,
I
absolutely.
was sure that's what you
That
meant.
we
I
will,
was
that we
wondering.
will revise the standards for 405 North Sarine to T4 and F.
There's not much parking there. Is that going to affect that? Because I only have on-street parking and I don't want people.
We have a motion on the table, so if
Yeah,
you hang on a
sure you
second.
can talk to staff.
That's okay.
We'll have one of our staff members talk to you.
That's okay.
Okay, we have a second? Okay. All right, we have a second. So go ahead and vote, please. Looks like we have ayes for everyone except for Board Member Boyle is a nay. So the motion passes. Thank you. Now we're on to the next item. Thank you for coming out, everybody. All right, the next item is item 4B. This is KZON 18-00688, District 6, within the 2100 to 2400 block of South Signal Butte Road, located south of Baseline on the east side of Signal Butte on approximately 7.4 acres. This is a request to rezone from RM2 PAD to RM2 PAD PAD and a site plan review to allow for an attached single residence subdivision. And our staff planner is Ryan McCann.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, members of the board. As you just stated, this is a rezone site plan that will allow for an attached single residence subdivision. The applicant did complete a citizen participation process. They had a neighborhood meeting, as you found in the report. No major concerns at the meeting, as notified or as updated. At the time the report was, or currently staff had not had any contact from any residents with concerns in the area. Staff has reviewed the proposal and found it is consistent with the 2040 general plan. The applicant is proposing to rezone the 7.4 acres from the existing RM2 PAD to RM2 PAD PAD. The property currently lies within the Sunland Springs Village master plan. This was the overall Sunland Springs Village master plan was approved back in 1995. The applicant has requested the additional PAD overlay to accommodate some minor deviations to the zoning ordinance as well as to accommodate a private drive. Some of the reductions would be a setback along the western property line along Signal Butte Road. The code would require a 30-foot setback. The applicant is proposing a 20-foot setback. In addition, the code requires a minimum separation distance between buildings of 25 feet. The applicant is proposing a minimum separation distance of 12 feet. That is consistent with previously approved condo projects within the overall master plan of the community. And finally, the request for a private drive. As part of the justification for the reduced development standards, the project will be included in the overall Sunland Springs Village HOA community. Residents will have access to all the same amenities, for instance, tennis, pickleball, the swim and fitness center, and their community recreation center. In addition, the applicant has stated some of these departures are required to accommodate the odd parcel shape that is encumbered by the 135-foot transmission line easement to the east, the WAPA easement. The intent of this overall project is to match the previous Sunland Springs residential condo products, most similarly built in 2016. The project will include 8 buildings comprising of 22 single-story units. And to conclude, the project complies with the general plan, meets the review criteria for a planned area development overlay, and meets site plan review criteria. And staff is recommending approval with conditions. Be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions for staff? No? Is the applicant here? Would you like to speak? Take maybe a name? Mr. Wesley, did you? Does anyone have any questions for the applicant? Okay, I don't show that we have any blue cards for this item, so if anyone would like to make a motion.
I will.
Madam Chair.
I thought there was somebody here that we
Should
could.
have
I
a blue
thought so
card.
too, but I didn't have a card. I apologize for that. I thought there was a reason we pulled it off, but I couldn't find a card. Oh, I think, did you have that card? Did you give it back? I'm sorry, we lost it in transit, sir. If you could just state your name and address, please, for the record, and
Before I say anything, I can't hear a word you're saying back there because you don't use the mics, okay?
oh, okay.
First of all, I want to thank the board members for allowing me to come up here today and make a few statements and allow me to speak. My name is Jack Yarrington. Been in the desert about 42 years now, and I live in an area near the area that is up for development in a Farnsworth home right now. And I guess my number one question, and I'm not familiar with this, is will you be planting grass and trees that need water every day?
Well, that's a question we'll have the applicant come up and
Yes or
respond to
no?
that. Sir, we'll go ahead and have the applicant come up. The applicant will come up and answer that question.
Okay, fine.
because
First question is, once again, I repeat it, will there be grass and trees that need water every day? I've been in the desert 42 years till I moved here recently. And this particular development, everybody's got grass and trees, blew my mind. I thought we lived in a desert, but apparently not. We've been wasting water all over X number of years living here. I just think we ought to take a stand and slowly get rid of the grass and the trees that need water every day.
Mr. Yarrington, I'm so sorry to interrupt you. Could you please state your address for
Okay.
the record?
My address?
Yes, please.
Sure.
Thanks.
I just moved, so forgive me. It should be 10960 East Monte, Monte Street, and that's Mesa, 85209.
Thank you.
Apartment 229.
Okay, thank you.
Sure, my fault. And by the way, I lived on a house and property for 30-some years, and we had 3 desert trees called Palo Verde, mesquite, and ironwood, and they grew just fine, and they didn't take any water. I actually went to an HOA meeting several times requesting that we remove the grass in my backyard where I presently live there, and the answer was no. The people from back east and the Midwest who moved here like trees and grass. So apparently they weren't programmed to understand why we live in the desert. But I just want to thank you for making those statements.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Would you like to come up, please, and address Mr. Yarrington's question? He's going to come up and just answer your question.
Sure.
You don't have to come back up.
I'm Jack. Nice
Craig. Yes, I know Mr. Yarrington. You live in the townhomes, don't you?
Wonderful place.
Thank you.
Except for the grass and the trees.
Well, our architect, Tim Nilsson, designed those, so if you have problems, talk to Tim about it. My name is Craig Ahlstrom, president of Farnsworth Development Company, address 2233 South Springwood Boulevard in Mesa. I am the developer, excuse me, of the Sunland Springs Master Community, and also the new project that's on the agenda, the Olivewood Condominium Project. And as part of these condos, as with most of the other condos in our community, we have a mixture of some grass and desert vegetation. Behind the condos, there's a small strip of grass. In the front is granite, desert plant material, and desert trees.
Take water.
Yes, they take water. So do I. But anyway, it is a mixture. It's not all grass. It's not all desert. It's a nice mixture that our customers, our residents have found very likable. As Mr. Yarrington has said, he's asked it to be removed, but they've enjoyed it, and I don't think it does a whole lot of problem with the water situation, but we comply with the codes that the City of Mesa has asked us to comply with, and our landscaping plan, when it's submitted through the civil plan review process, will show that. Any questions, Madam Chair, members of the
Any
board?
questions?
Would be happy to do that.
The applicant is up here. Okay, thank you.
You bet.
Thank you very much.
Can I say something?
Just real quick, I'm sorry to.
We live in a desert.
Yeah, that was quick. Thank you. All right. Any questions of staff or amongst ourselves or anyone ready to make a motion? Looks like Board Member Allen is.
I would like to make a motion that we approve ZON 18-00688, District 6, within the 2100 to 2400 block of South Signal Butte Road, located south of Baseline on the east side of Signal Butte Road, rezoning from RM2 PAD to RM2 PAD, and site plan review. Approval with conditions.
Would you like to add the plat also?
Yes, I would like to do them both at the same time. Also, recommend approval for the preliminary plat for SSV Olivewood Condos, District 6, within the 2100 to 2400 block of South Signal Butte Road, located south of Baseline on the east side of Signal Butte Road, a preliminary plat.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion. Is there a second? Second. Okay, everyone please vote. All right, the motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Now we're on to item 4D. Let me grab my glasses here. This is case ZON 18-00693 in District 6 within the 2800 and 2900 blocks of South Haas Road and the 8400 block of East Guadalupe. This is approximately 10 acres. It's a rezoning request from RS43 to RM2 PAD-AF and a site plan review to allow for multi-residential development. And our staff planner is Cassidy Welch.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. This request is for a rezone from RS43 to RM2 PAD-AF to allow for the development of 96 freestanding rental multi-residence development. This request features individual or duplex units focused around an enhanced courtyard, with each unit having a private open space. The primary gated access is off of Guadalupe Road with a secondary gated access from Haas. The site does feature a central driveway and parking aisle circulating the development. The amenities and open space are located at the center of the site with a dog park located at the northwest corner of the site. This request does include a planned area development overlay for reduced landscape and building setbacks, as well as a reduced building separation. Staff is recommending approval with conditions, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions for Ms. Welch? Okay. Would the applicant like to make a presentation?
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board. Brendan Ray, 702 East Osborne, here on behalf of the applicant Next Metro Communities. We're certainly in agreement with staff on this one and would request this body's approval in accordance with that recommendation. I believe there are some speaker cards that have been turned in tonight. I will tell you that we did have a neighborhood meeting. One neighbor showed up. I don't believe that neighbor is here. I know that one of the gentlemen that wishes to speak tonight, Al, we did have a conversation with him after the DRB study session a while back, and then he and I spoke this afternoon to talk about some things. And so if it's okay with this board, I will forego the presentation I have and would love to listen to what comments the neighbors have and provide an opportunity to stand up afterwards and response if that works.
That's fine.
Thank you.
So we'll go ahead and invite Mr. Al Malaro up here, please. If you could just state your name and address for the record, sir.
Good afternoon, Madam Chairperson, ladies and gentlemen of the board. My name is Al Maloro. I reside at 8602 East Ocasa Avenue, Mesa, 85212. I'm new in the area, moved in a couple of years ago. This is my first time to a zoning hearing. I used to do zoning for Pep Boys. I was National Director of Site Development. I'm quite impressed with your layout here, your professionalism, and I look forward to coming back more often and so forth. But that's enough silver spooning right now. Let's get to the crux of the matter. They're asking for a rezoning, and if you're going to ask for a rezoning, then you shouldn't be asking for leniency on certain things like setbacks and so forth. We're always looking for the quality of life, health, welfare, and safety of a development. Water, sewer, taxes are important for the city. Now, in speaking with the developer's representative, he said he had preliminary meetings, and he said that the city has plenty of water and plenty of sewer, and they're not worried about the taxation. The original zoning would have called for like 30 homes with about a 7,000 square foot area for those homes. They're asking for 96 units. The amount of traffic is going to be about 288 to 300 traffic units per day. Now, if you're aware of that corner, if you know where it is, there's now going to be a fast food right across the street, a Burger King. Burger King usually generates 400 to 700 cars per day, and then there's the Walmart Food Center, which is generating about 600 to 800 cars a day. So we're looking at approximately 300 cars for this development, 400 to 700 cars for which is now under construction. They put the fence up for the Burger King, and 700 for the Walmart. It's going to become quite busy on that corner. The primary entrance and exit is going to be on Hawes Avenue because the ingress-egress on Guadalupe is right-hand turn in, right-hand turn out only. There'll be an island there, so you won't be able to make a left-hand turn. So the majority of the traffic is going to come out on Hawes. A lot of people are going to take shortcuts, and they'll come through Ocasa Avenue where I live, which is another matter altogether. But I'm concerned about the greenhouse gases that this development is going to be using up. I'm also concerned about the traffic for safety on that corner. The other items that I'm concerned with are more like planning items, like in speaking with the developer's representative, there's no playground area. And I'm sure there's going to be children in there, but there's no swings and no slide for children. And he said, well, that they have very small amounts of children in these developments. Is that in their bylaws that they do not let children into these apartments? Okay. They're so tightly put together is that there's very little room and no side yard setbacks, no rear yard setbacks. Their landscaping has been reduced. On the setbacks, the north setback required is 30 feet. They're asking for a 20-foot, 10-foot reduction. 20 feet on the east side, they're granting, they want 10. 30 feet on the west, they want 20. 25 on the south, they want 15. Landscaping setbacks are required. 30 feet is a requirement, they're asking for 15. 20 on the east side, they want 10. 30 on the west side, they want to give 15. If you're going to rezone something, make sure that you're going to follow the city requirements. Okay? So these are some of the things that I'm concerned about.
Well, thank you very much. We
Okay.
appreciate your comments.
And thank you for letting me come in front of you.
Thank you very much. Would you like to respond to Mr. Maloro's comments? I don't have any other blue cards, so it's your turn.
Madam Chair, members of the board, I was taking notes. Hopefully I can address most of the comments that we heard. One One of them kind of dealt with the development standards and why we are requesting deviations. As staff indicated in their report, we are requesting a number of deviations. We've worked closely with them on the design of this site with those deviations in mind. I think it's important to note that this type of a rental casita development isn't one that is necessarily contemplated by the code and by this particular zoning district that we are asking the site be rezoned to. We have worked with them. We are requesting minimum setbacks along our east, west, south, north. Those are detailed in the report. But I think it's important to note that, again, staff is supportive. We're supportive. This type of development, although compared to a traditional single-family neighborhood is more dense, we are providing an appropriate amount of amenities and open space. I will tell you that throughout the site, between a combination of private and public open space on this little 8-acre net site, 28% of that is considered open space. And we work closely with staff on that to provide them the calculations and support for that. With respect to traffic, there's no question that when you have a vacant site and you develop it, you're going to increase the number of cars that are traveling on it. However, in connection with this development, we are making necessary improvements to the adjacent roadways to help accommodate that. I believe Hawes Road heading north is not one lane, but there's one northbound lane on Hawes. As part of this development, we will be required to put in an additional lane. Additionally, we will be making improvements along our Guadalupe frontage. So it's one of those things that if you look at it and certainly look at what the general plan designates it as, which is neighborhood village center, if my notes are right, that particular designation contemplates a variety of uses, including commercial, including kind of mixed use, and including residential, as we are proposing. And so it was always envisioned that there would be traffic associated with this corner, and certainly when compared to other potential uses that might go on this particular site, the traffic that we are generating is significantly less than a commercial development. We talked about, I'll touch base on access. As you can see, our primary access is not Hawes. Our primary access is off of Guadalupe Road. And we are aware of the restrictions that the median presents. Notwithstanding that, we've located it there. As you will see on the site plan, we do have a boulevard entrance to the entry gates, gates on either side that leads to the leasing office in the main amenity area. One of the things that we found with respect to the type of demographics, this kind of gives you an idea of the type of people that we anticipate in this type of a community. Next Metro is a Phoenix-based business that between developments that are built, under construction, pre-construction, entitlements, planning, not only here in the Valley, but throughout Colorado and Texas as well, has about 2,400 units. So they do have experience with this type of a product. And so that gives you an idea, and the third bullet from the bottom indicates the number of children that we will have. And what we've found as we've looked at this is that the type of residents that want to come here aren't looking for the resort-style type amenities that you see in other traditional multifamily communities. A lot of the amenities that they find come from the surrounding area. And that's why the way that this has been designed is appropriate for this particular type of development. And so with that, I think I touched on all of the points raised by Al. Again, we are appreciative of staff being supportive on this one and would request this board's recommendation for approval in accordance with that recommendation. Happy to answer any questions.
I have more just of a comment than a question, just for the benefit of Mr. Maloro, and that you are asking for the P80 overlay, which allows flexibility in the development standards. And I thought maybe you might want to comment a little bit on that, or maybe even staff, on why you felt, just a few words on why you felt that it kind of fell under the, or met the requirements for a PAD.
Thank you. When considering a PAD, you're looking at the quality of the development as well as this specific requests. So staff felt that those requests weren't detrimental to the area. In relation to that building separation, the applicant had indicated that this development, the development standards were written for a traditional residential, multi-residential complex where you have a very large building with multiple units within that building and several large buildings on a site. These are freestanding rental casitas with one unit or duplex units. And so they indicated that this should be treated more like a small lot single residence development, and staff was supportive of that. In addition to that, we did get the enhanced courtyards. So while the building separation, minimum building separation is 8 feet, there is 20 feet between the buildings at that courtyard.
Thank you. Thanks. Does anyone have any questions for staff or for the applicant? No? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, any discussion, or if anyone's ready to make a motion, you're welcome to do so.
All right.
It's like it's board member Allen's show today.
Well, you know, unless somebody else wants to, it's great.
Looks like you're ready to go.
I would recommend that we make a recommendation of approval for ZON 18-00693 within the 2800 block and 2900 block of South Hawes Road and the 8400 block of East Guadalupe Road, located on the southeast corner of Guadalupe and Hawes. The rezoning from RS 43 to RM2 PAD AF and site plan review. Recommendation approval with conditions.
All right, thank you. So we have a motion. Is there a second? Okay. We have a motion and a second. Everyone vote, please. Okay, the motion passes unanimously. Thank you. All right, the final item, item 6A. This is case ZON 18-00689 in District 6 within the 3200 and 3300 blocks of South Power Road, located north of Elliott Road on the east side of Power on approximately 9 acres. This is a request to rezone from LIPAD to RM2 PAD AF in the site plan review to allow for a multi-residential development. And Cassie Welsh is the planner.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. So the applicant is requesting to rezone the site from LIPAD to RM2 PAD AF to allow for the development of 99 freestanding rental units for multi-residence development. This site is located within the mixed-use activity district / employment district, as well as the inner loop district of the Gateway Strategic Development Plan. The development is not consistent with the general plan or the Gateway Strategic Development Plan. The general plan supports development that builds neighborhoods, stabilizes and grows the job base, and improves the sense of place. The development fails to create a great neighborhood. It is isolated with no connection to adjacent neighborhoods. In addition to that, there is no pedestrian connection to supportive uses. As well, it is surrounded by an existing self-storage facility, which will contribute to its isolated nature and is not conducive to a long-term quality residential development. Additionally, the proposal fails to protect and advance the employment areas and job growth in the city. The Gateway Strategic Development Plan was created to protect the development area surrounding the Phoenix Mesa Gateway Airport. Residential is specifically incompatible with that inner loop district and Gateway Strategic Development Plan due to its proximity to the airport as well as the overflight activities. Staff believes approval of this request will significantly impact adjacent properties' viability for job growth as well. The site features gated access from Power with a central driveway and parking aisles circulating that site. The amenities and open space are located in the center of the site. The request does include a planned area development overlay for reduced building and landscape setbacks, as well as a reduced building separation. The general plan is there and emphasizes the protection of employment areas and recognizes that the future of Mesa is tied to its ability to secure a strong economic base. As I mentioned in the study session, City of Mesa is below other valley cities in its job per capita ratio. And staff believes that this development fails to comply with the general plan as well as the Gateway Strategic Development Plan. And it brings up a greater concern of the long-term viability of such a residential development, as well as the loss of viable economic area. For these reasons, staff is recommending denial, and I would be happy to answer any questions you may have. In addition to that, we do have a representative from the Economic Development Department here to answer any questions you may have about economic development.
It's all right with you. Well, you want to have some questions or have economic development discuss first?
Could somebody from Economic Development come up and kind of talk to us a little bit about the employment center and what the viability? I understand, spending my time out at Gateway, I understand that this is a gateway kind of into the gateway, the airport area, and just kind of give us the feeling from Economic Development.
Madam Chair, members of the board, Eric Bopp, Deputy Director for Strategic Initiatives in our Economic Development Department, here on behalf of Bill Jabziniak, our Department Director. He wanted to point out that this area was recently designated an opportunity zone that's going to have some economic benefit moving forward, and we want to see how that plays out as far as facilitating growth, employment growth in this area. It's also on the western edge of the Elliott Road Technology Corridor. As we look at extending the Elliott Road Technology Corridor from Signal Butte to 202 all the way over to the Power Road, ideally, this would be an entry point for the Elliott Road Technology Corridor. What the future of that will hold, I don't think anybody can tell today. But if you look in Chandler at the Price Road Corridor, how would a small rental subdivision have impacted the Price Road Corridor 10 years ago if it had planted a seed there? We don't know that. We support staff in the denial of this case because we think there is a higher and better use. We want to see a sustainable Mesa with a good balance of jobs and rooftops. Obviously, we have a lot of rooftops, and we're working hard on a daily basis for additional job opportunities, and we see this specific site to have future importance as we try to develop that area.
Thank you, Eric. Go ahead.
Yeah, quick question, Eric. From a highest and best use standpoint, off the corner, what do you think that would be here? Just curious. I'm not disagreeing in any fashion, I hope you know, with the desire for employment and those types of things. Just curious about this specific site, what the thoughts are of use.
Absolutely. There's some larger acreage tracts of land immediate to the east that may land sizable projects in the future, nothing definitive by any means. And then you start seeing support services, support office, support retail, some support commercial activity, that things like that I could envision being located here and being incorporated into that corridor feel, that employment, retail, mixed use, and industrial feel, more so than a rental community.
Thank you.
Eric, could you touch on the opportunity zone a little bit more? I know just enough about it, but maybe for the benefit of everyone else.
So the Opportunity Zone is a new federal program that the rules are still kind of being written about that program, but it has generated a lot of increased interest in the various opportunity zones within Mesa. It's an opportunity for investors and companies alike to invest in an opportunity zone, which has some real tax implications over 1 to 10 year period of time. We have seen the development community, the industrial development community, the commercial development community has really expressed interest in that, and there seems to be quite a bit of activity of people positioning to acquire land within the opportunity zone. but because of that opportunity. And the Phoenix Mesa metro area was recently named one of the top 10 areas in the U.S. for opportunity zone investments. And so we're excited about that. Again, how is that going to impact this site specifically? How is it going to impact things moving forward? I'm sure ownership has probably had the land for a while and they're like, we're ready to do something with it. But we see an awful lot of activity being generated right now, and we would appreciate the patience to see what the future would hold from an employment standpoint for the site.
Any other questions for Eric?
Can I just, maybe this is you, maybe this is staff, that RS-43 lot that's catty corner to this, do you see that developing as RS-43, or is there anticipation that, maybe I've already asked this question, or is there anticipation that that's going to change? And
Chair, Board Member, that is holdover zoning from when it was annexed. No, we would not expect that to develop as large lot single residence. In fact, we've recently received and have a pre-submittal in for residential casitas on that property also. That's under evaluation.
Wait, so someone wants to do it currently, but you don't see it happening that way? But they have the zoning for it?
No, we don't. Again, as the board pointed out for this piece, this whole corridor along Elliott Road has been designated for many years for extension of both the Power Road commercial corridor as well as the Elliott Road Tech corridor type development. So this is a key part of that, and no, we don't see it going residential either.
So, okay, then I'm just curious, if someone owns the land and wants to develop it that way, you're just going to say no? We're seeing this differently even though you have zoning?
Staff is going to recommend no. It'll be up to this board and council ultimately to be the ones to make that decision.
So then we're going to have a situation where they have the zoning for it, staff's not recommending it, and we're making the decision. This is, I know this is about a different project, but.
Yeah, I think you're crossing over. They're talking about a proposal that would change that zoning, but we're also not talking about that case right now.
Right. Well, because they keep talking about it being isolated, and I'm like, well, if that develops as multifamily or large lot.
So I think I'll jump in here with some of my comments and just speaking on with economic development then as well as they had consistently mentioned the Elliott Road corridor that also is tying in with some work that the city has been doing on the Mesa Inner Loop area, which is also relooking at the designations in there and what the possibilities of stuff could be with the Gateway Airport and things like that. And so Elliott crosses the wash and the canal there, and then the next one down is just the 202. So that's a pretty important corner for traffic, and you know that also connects to the 202 on the other side. So I think this is a really important corner. And as you mentioned, the opportunity zones on that coming up. This isn't like we've had a whole bunch of cases coming through recently because nothing's taking foot. We've seen a lot of stuff going along the corridor, and it's just kind of pushing its way west. So like they mentioned, I feel like we'd be kind of cutting off their legs when they're just starting to get going to see what happens, so.
Any other?
Madam Chairman, if I could, I agree with those comments. I think that for me, the opportunity zone is a tremendous asset, and I hate to see housing go into an area of an opportunity zone. We have very limited opportunity zones in Mesa, and economic development led the charge in getting that done and thought outside the box to bring this gateway area in to really accelerate the opportunities that are going to come to that area. So I don't think it's the right project for that area because of the opportunity zone. In addition, I don't think we should be putting additional housing closer to Gateway Airport, which is also a tremendous economic engine for the city of Mesa. And then the entrance to the Elliott Road Technology Corridor as well, I do see it like the Price Road area in South Chandler. This area is going to develop to be a tremendous employment center for Mesa, and I think this project, I was happy to support the last project from this applicant that came along. I thought that was a good plan, but here it's just the wrong thing for this piece of property, and so I can't get behind that.
Well, unless anyone has any questions for Eric, we need to have the applicant come and have an opportunity to make a presentation, but we might invite you back.
Thank you.
Thank you. I didn't forget you, Mr. Ray.
Kind of seems like it.
I'm sorry.
I've got to admit,
We got off track a bit. Sorry about that.
I've been doing this a while, and I don't know that I've ever experienced what we just experienced there. But be that as it may, we will soldier on, as they say, and make a presentation. Madam Chair, members of the board, Brendan Ray, 702 East Osborne, here on behalf of the applicant Next Metro Communities. I'm not sure where to begin in light of the discussion that just took place. Clearly, there is a divergence of opinion on this, and in all candor, when I look at this particular site, in light of the discussions that have taken place, I failed to realize that a small 9-acre site at a mid-block location that's been zoned light industrial since 2007 was kind of the linchpin for the Elliott Road, AKA Price Road corridor, and the key to its future growth and development. We've had a fair amount of discussions with planning staff as we've gone along the way about the site, about the proposed use, the layout and design. And certainly, I think it was touched on by Board Member Astle. One of the things that we've really looked at is what is the highest and best use of this site? Because it's wonderful to take a look at the macro level, and those are certainly important discussions that are ongoing in the city and will continue to go. And certainly we recognize and appreciate the discussion that this particular body has had recently about employment, about jobs, and we're certainly respectful of that. I actually live not too far from the Price Road corridor, and as I drive up and down that corridor on a daily basis, within a quarter mile of that corridor, you do have residences. And so as I look, and if I were to orient this north-south, within a quarter mile, the approximate mid-block there, are proposed residences. Even if you go a little bit further to the north on Elliott Road, there are residences that exist there today, an existing single-family development. And so as we start to look at it, I think this is, in light of the discussion that we've had, I think it needs to be looked at on a case-by-case basis. Again, the macro level is important, but as you break down and start to look at this site, I believe there's a series of unique characteristics for this particular site. We do believe, contrary to economic development and contrary to planning staff, that it is an appropriate use for this, again, mid-block site. If you look and contemplate as to what could be the highest and best use for this site, we heard that it was isolated. And then we heard at the same time that it's not connected to anything else. And so it's kind of this, what do you do with it? It's an isolated parcel, okay, great. How do you connect it to everything else? And this proposed development is not unlike one that we did in a similar situation. The board will, some of you on the board will remember the case that Next Metro brought for a Villa Lehigh, west of the southwest corner of Val Vista and Thomas. Similar situation, not identical, but similar in the fact that we had undeveloped commercial property to our east. And as you would find in a gated community like this and other, whether it's a rental community or a single-family community, there is limited access to begin with. That's why it's a gated community. And in this instance, as you will see on the site plan, we are providing appropriate connectivity to that future development, similar to what we did up at Val Vista and Thomas. That one, similarly situated. We had access out to future commercial. We had access along Thomas Road, access through our site, similar to what we're seeing here. And so it's something that we feel is appropriate. Again, we believe that it provides additional housing choices and support for that future growth and future development.
Again, you saw this slide in the last presentation, but this gives you an idea of the type of demographics. This type of development represents a lifestyle choice, and people choose to live here. People that are tired of living in traditional apartments. Interestingly to note, the middle one is 58% of the people that come here have lived in a single-family home. So we believe that it is an appropriate use for this site and does provide support for it. And like I said, we really struggle to see this as being if this board does recommend approval, we have a tough time seeing that if this one goes, then all the rest of the dominoes are going to fall, and there goes the tech corridor. And that's why, again, we look at it on a case-by-case basis. As I mentioned, the zoning map, this site has been zoned since 2007. The self-storage facility has developed around it. And that same developer is a commercial developer. It's not a farmer selling it. It's a commercial developer that's proposing to sell it. And who better than a commercial developer to know what the highest and best use for that land would be, given that it's had the entitlements on it for 11 years and hasn't developed in accordance with it. There was a comment made at the study session yesterday about an employment use, and we can tongue-in-cheek argue that we would employ more people than the self-storage facility, and we would agree with that. I think this board and even staff and economic development would agree that a storage facility is not a highest and best use for an employment designated site. And again, as you look at it, given its mid-block location, it is isolated. And let's just play devil's advocate, and let's say everything else develops around it, that you get the commercial at the corner, because I would agree, the gateway to the Elliott Road corridor is the immediate corners of the northwest, northeast, and southeast corners of Elliott Road, similar to Price Road. The southwest and southeast corners, as you come down off the 101 into Price Road, that's the gateway. And that's, you know, again, you go out a little bit further, you can start to see that the residential flanks it, similar to what you see here. The other thing that as you start to look at it again closely, we heard the comment made by economic development that there's large parcels to the east that if they develop, they see this particular piece as being supportive of that future development, be it commercial, be it office. Personally, I really struggle with that because we got a big canal running down to it. In addition, on the west side of this site, on the east side of this site is a self-storage facility. So unless, and I may be mistaken, unless there's plans and designs to put a bridge over that area, I have a tough time seeing how this particular mid-block location site, again, is the key and is going to provide the support services necessary for things as you head further east, given its isolation. I'm going to touch briefly on this, the general plan, and as you all know, the general plan isn't zoning. It doesn't set hard and fast lines as to where the various things are. They're kind of bubbles. They kind of outline visions for area and stuff like that. And that's the site as you look at it. As we get a little bit closer, there's the site outlined in black. We are at the outermost edge of this mixed employment, mixed use activity employment district. And certainly, as we've seen in other places, you kind of get a little gray area when you're on the edge. I would agree, and I wouldn't be standing up here if I was trying to sell this to you in the smack dab middle of this employment zone. That's not appropriate. That's not at the heart. But at the edge, again, I believe that looking at it site-specific warrants additional consideration as you look at this for the highest and best use. That yellow to the north, as you can see on the general plan, is designated neighborhood suburban. And we believe that actually developing this site with this type of use is consistent with good planning principles in terms of graduating densities, intensities. You want your more intense, high turnover, high type use down on the hard corner. And that's where it's appropriate. And you transition to less intense even as you go up, as you go in and stuff like that. And clearly, given the site constraints with the canal, you've got a self-storage facility north of us and then a residential community. We can make an argument that we're more intense than the self-storage facility less intense than the future commercial and office development that would go south of there. So again, as we look at it in a specific fashion, we do believe it. And I read the staff report, and again, in looking at this site, we don't believe that, again, this is a regional employment center, nor does it have the potential to it as a 9-acre mid-block site. We don't think, and respectfully disagree, that it's going to accommodate a wide range of employment or going to be a viable center of commercial activity. We've all been drive around. We live in areas that we see that mid-block locations are typically the most challenging to develop. And that's even when you have existing development all around it. And so we don't believe that, again, presuming everything goes, that this mid-block location is still going to be challenged. There still will be development challenges associated with it. As we look at the other plans, again, I'm just going to show them to you. The discussions that we've had about the general plan apply the same. With respect to the Gateway Strategic Development Plan, we're at the very outer edge of the Interloop District. Again, this is probably a different discussion if I'm some other place on that tan shaded area. I thought it was interesting. I went and pulled up the Phoenix Mesa Gateway Airport Land Use Compatibility Plan update that was done in 2007. And this was done as an update to the Part 150 FAR study, I believe is what it's called. And you can see the site in that. Importantly, as you note, and again, this was approved in 2017, Phoenix Mesa Gateway, and looking at generalized future land uses, had it this kind of beige type color, mixed use, where residential was permitted. That note takes it down to the city of Mesa and the airport, or the overflight areas for 1 and 2. We're nowhere near those overflight areas. And so as we look at it, at least we respectfully disagree that this is going to somehow shut down the airport or inhibit or prohibit its things. And as we look at it, and again, the question that I'm sure will be asked is, well, Brennan, at what point, where do we draw the line? I think if you look at it, again, on a case-by-case basis, there are a variety of unique conditions as you look on this site. Its location, its size, the canal running through it, that make it so that it makes sense. I'm not going to belabor it anymore. Again, I'm sensitive to the discussions that you guys have had in the past about this, but from our perspective, this is something that makes sense to us. And we believe there is support in the general plan for this type of a development. We don't believe that it's going to be the one domino that falls all the others. And we would request this body's recommendation for approval. And with that, I'm happy to answer any additional questions.
Thank you, Mr. Ray. Does anyone have any questions? No? Okay. Thank you very much. Any questions for staff? Just comments, motion?
I have a question on the opportunity zone. How long has that been in place for this location?
Opportunity zone legislation was passed this year. The rules, 2018, the rules to the opportunity zone are still currently being written, and the program's being developed as we speak. So it is a very, very new program.
And it is over an area around this entire area?
Correct. It includes the census tract that includes Gateway Airport and the census tract around Gateway Airport that includes up to this area as well.
Is this on the northern edge of that?
Correct.
Opportunity
Yep.
zone? Okay. Any other?
Wait, is it that same corner? Is it because it's the corner of that residential switching to commercial? Is that where the opportunity zone also kind of comes to a corner?
I don't have the map entirely memorized where it ends, but it is in the northwest corner of that opportunity zone. And the city has multiple locations. There's a couple of downtown locations as well.
Chair, Board Member Boyle, I don't have that map either, but it follows census tract boundaries, and I suspect the census tract goes to the power lines, which is to the north of this property.
Okay. Any other questions for Eric? Thank you. Comments? Questions?
I guess I'll just kind of tell you where I stand on this one, and I struggle with this because for several different reasons. One, I think we need to protect our employment zones. I think that it's imperative that we, usually we look at these on a case-by-case basis, and sometimes they make sense and sometimes they don't. But if we piecemeal these out, like I look at this right now with the storage unit or storage facility that kind of wraps around this site, and obviously that's not the highest and best use for property, but I know at the time there's really not a whole lot we could do about it because of the use. So it is what it is. I don't remember how long it's been there, but I think that a couple different things. One, this type of housing, I'm not sure that it's sustainable over a long period of time because they are smaller units. It's kind of a standalone out there by itself, and so I have concerns with that as well. But I'm leaning towards several different things, that it doesn't comply with our general plan, that it is located within an employment district, and it is such in close proximity to the Gateway Airport. And having spent some time out there working on, in economic development out of the Gateway Airport, I have a tendency to favor protecting the areas around the airport. So for myself, I'm leaning towards, along with staff recommendation, both economic development and the planning recommendation of denial.
Thank you.
Yeah, so this one, for me, also very difficult. It's a hard parcel. There's a lot to it. There's a lot of interesting decisions that have been made over the years to arrive at this spot. I have a little bit of a different opinion on this one. Again, as we would all agree, employment and employment zones are crucial. And in Mesa, we want to push that number up, and we're interested in making sure that we keep what we can and properly lay out employment areas where they will best be functional. I also think that we are on a site that does border, has a lot of gray area. The general plan kind of swoops it up right there just on the corner, and it touches a lot of different uses, and school going in across the street. I've got all these thoughts in my head, and highest and best use thoughts, and I'm looking at this storage unit behind it, and I'm thinking, okay, well, another one could go in somewhere around there too. This is not going, down on the hard corner, lots of room for development. I tend to think that this could be viable. Would it be perfect if somebody was at our front door that is fitting right within the employment piece of this? I mean, this does employ a good amount of people, more than the storage facility around it, and I know we've already talked about that, but I'm just finding it a little bit hard to think that this, from a case-by-case basis, wouldn't fit here and couldn't be a viable solution. Again, I wouldn't put it smack dab in the middle. I wouldn't take that RS-43 lot below it and think we should switch that out, because I think those could be more usable off of Elliott Road. So this is challenging, and I can kind of leave it at that and listen to the board.
Thank you. Yeah.
So I like the type of housing option you're presenting. I don't think our city has enough variety. Loved the dog park in your first proposal. I just hope you have a big, strong fence, because it's right on the corner. It's the only thing that's worrying me. I just don't think it makes sense here. The opportunity zone being so relatively new, Skybridge was only announced in 2018. That could change the character of this entire area. This may be not a linchpin property, but certainly it is part of this entire area that's going to see some dramatic change given the type of job growth that we anticipate in that Gateway Airport. So I am not in favor of this proposal. I'm with staff on this one. I think it's imperative that we protect every piece of bare land that we have in that airport corridor, because we cannot anticipate the kind of change that could be occurring over time, especially once Skybridge gets going.
Thank you. Any comments?
We kind of already talked a little bit about this. I have two concerns with it. I do love the product. I do think it's great. I do think there's lots of places it can go in Mesa. We already had approved one. And I do think it can go near to here. I do think possibly in the future, given time, if the area, depending on how the other areas around it, it still could go here. However, my two issues are that if it was to develop as it is, where location with the self-storage around it, and it does go commercial to the south, and employment, it does feel like it was just put there. And I could see me like wondering why that happened. It seems out of place. And the second thing is that I had mentioned, we just finished, it hasn't been adopted, it's just a policy with the city of Mesa, is the Mesa Interloop project. And this was part of it. And we had, I want to say 60, 80, I don't know, 100 stakeholders, landowners in that discussion. And we did change some, as on the general plan, that whole mixed-use employment area. There are areas in there that were changed and re-looked at for residential, high-density residential, different things like that. This area, with all those discussions, was elected to remain industrial and employment. It was not one of those portions that was changed because there was too much employment or too much of this. So having that just occurred within the last year, and the opportunity zone, I feel at this time, I do elect in the future to change my opinion down the line if things don't work out the way it's, we're hoping it's going to at the city. But I feel at this time, it really is kind of, it's not gonna, if it was to develop like this, I don't feel, like you had mentioned, that it's gonna prevent the rest of the corridor from going. I just don't think it's the transition and the cohesion of that area would be as strong as it could possibly be, is my only comment at this time. So, yeah, that's, sorry.
Board Member Boyle, were you going to make any comments?
I guess I'm seeing the argument both ways. I'm probably like 48, 52 on it. What concerns me a little bit is, they've been talking about the Price Road corridor and the things that it's done there, and the small, detached, kind of homely look of these units. If you're coming down that way, you're gonna be like, I think they don't inspire tech. They don't inspire airport. They don't say things like me. Kind of, it's the nature of it, and then also sort of the design a little bit of the units. So it's not. I don't feel like it fits in this area that we're hoping kind of grows up and is kind of the big economic engine part of Mesa. So I think I'm not by far, but I'm a little bit I'm more on the against side.
Board Member Crockett, did you want to make any final comments?
I think I don't have much to add to what I said earlier. I agree with the comments that have been made on this, and I do agree that we're just beginning to see the fruit of this opportunity zone. And I think it's going to really energize that area, and I think economic development's already seeing that. And I just think I'd like to see what happens here. I don't think this is the right project for that parcel of property.
Okay, thank you. Just a few comments. I like the housing type too, and I look forward to it developing at the prior site and elsewhere in the city. I think it's got a lot of potential, and there's a lot of people who are going to want to live in that type of community, definitely. I know you said you're focused on general plan, not the zoning. Get that. It is a guideline. I think in this case, it feels like it's guiding us towards protecting the area. And for all the other reasons that we've talked about, the opportunity zone, the possibilities there for the future, I'm really feeling strongly that we need to preserve that area for future employment uses. But if anyone has any other comments or make a motion or anything, go for it.
I'll be consistent and just hit them all
It's
this
Shelley
time,
again.
I guess.
Ellen, yes.
I would recommend that we put forth a recommendation of a denial for ZON 18-00689, District 6, within the 3200 and 3300 block of South Power Road, located north of Elliott Road on the east side of Power Road, rezoning from LIPAD to RM2 PAD-AF and site plan review with recommendation of denial.
Thank you. Board Member Allen, do we have a second? Okay, everyone vote, please. Okay, so we have everyone voting aye except for Board Member Assel. Vice Chair Assel is a nay. So the motion carries. Thank you. Mr. Wesley, do you have any other comments, any other business? Okay. All right, well, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting. Okay, is there a second?
There you go.
I'll second that one all day long.
Yeah, exactly.
That-
Perfect.
Oh. Well, go ahead.
But I won't, I didn't
Everyone,
vote.
push your button
Oh, we
there.
didn't vote?
Yes, Deanna, if you want to push your button there. Okay, unanimous. Thank you very much. The meeting is adjourned.